Hi everybody, Carissa here with Inky Fairy Designs. I'm going to show you how I colored the image on my card today. This image is Saturated Canary. It's a digital stamp that I printed out on Strathmore 140-pound watercolor paper. It is hot pressed, so it has a more smooth texture than your cold press watercolor paper. I'm coloring the image using Inktense watercolor pencils, and I'm coloring the background using my Peerless Watercolors. This is how I've decided to store my Peerless Watercolors. I like having the full palette right in front of me. I can see the colors easily as they'll go down, and it just really kind of provides me inspiration to see the palette right in front of me, and it's easy to take with me anywhere. So I'm going to start with coloring the background. Now for my background, I like to use a wet on wet technique for watercoloring. And what this means is that I just apply a wash of clean water to my paper before I bring in the color. So you can see how that really just lets the color blend and move on its own as I drop in each new color. So I really like this technique for creating my backgrounds. It's very loose. You don't really think about it much. The colors do all the blending and the water blends for you, so you're not really kind of going in and technically trying to do anything but just add the color and let it blend on its own. So I did the same thing with the ground beneath her, and so I'm just touching that up before I go in and start coloring the image. For the image herself, I'm using the Inktense pencils. Now these are an ink-based pencil that activates with water. So I'm using a slightly different technique than the background. I'm going in and I'm laying down the color onto my image directly with the pencil. The image is dry, and now I'm going to come in with a small number 0 brush, watercolor brush, and pull out that color. My brush isn't completely wet. It's more of a damp water brush. So I'm just putting enough water on there to activate the color and bring it into the image. So for my skin, I'm using 4 different colors that I showed you earlier. I'm using Saddle Brown, Baked Earth, Carmine Pink, and Sepia ink. Now what I'm doing here is I'm creating a color using Baked Earth and Carmine Pink. The Baked Earth is a little bit orange for me, and the Carmine Pink is super red, so I blend those together to give me more of a toned down peachy skin tone. And so I create that off to the side on some acetate, and then I blend it with water, and then I can pick up the pigment with my brush and bring it in directly onto my image. So it's another way to use the Inktense pencils to create colors. If you don't have a pencil that is the exact color that you want, you can definitely do this technique and create your own color. It is more freestyle, so your images may not turn out the exact same way each time you color, even though you are using the same colors each time. So just play around with it and bring in the color, add more color, take away color. Sometimes you'll see that I put my paper towel on the image to pull up some of the color if I kind of got too heavy with it. So it's very forgiving, and as long as it's wet, you can definitely play around with the pigment that way. So for the clothing, I'm doing a different technique. So I wanted to have a lot of shimmer, and I'm using my Wink of Stella glitter brush pen. This is a water-based product, so it does activate the Inktense pencils. As it was, you can use the same technique with the Wink of Stella with any type of watercoloring or watercolor markers or pencils that you have. So you can see that it really just activates that pigment and pulls it out so that I get a nice dark to light shading just by adding my pigment from the pencil on the image where I want the darkest spot to be. So if you just think about it that way, where you're coloring, you're adding the color where you want the darkest shadows to be, and then pulling it out with whatever you're using, water or like a Stella, pulling it out to your light highlights. That's kind of the way that I think about when I'm coloring with the Inktense pencils. So now I'm coloring her shoes. I'm using Madder Brown here. and I am using just the water like I did with her skin. So I laid down the pigment, like I said, where the shadows would be, and then I'm taking my damp brush and I'm pulling it out. So you can see that um, I do clean off my brush quite a bit while I'm coloring. So I don't want to pull out too much and then I don't have any variation of light and dark. And then another technique that you'll see me doing here is I'm pulling the color directly from the tip of the pencil. I tend to do this in the larger areas like her boot because it's harder to pull out the color so far when you're just adding the line at the shading areas. So if I need to get more pigment, I'll just dampen my brush and pull that pigment directly from the pencil tip and lay it down that way. So it's another way to add more color to your image. And like you can see, I can add more layers and get darker shadows and still have the lightness on the top of her boot. So the great thing about the Inktense pencils is once they are dry, they are permanent. So you can add more of that same color and get shading and still keep your highlights. So it's really, these pencils really go a long way for you when you're coloring. So I'm just going to finish up her boot here and then start working on the flowers. For the flowers, I use the same technique where I lay down the pigment around the edges and pull it in. I'm actually using two colors for the flowers. I'm using Poppy Red and Tangerine. I like these two colors together. The tangerine gives me a nice highlight and the red really deepens up those shadows. So you can see I'm just coming in here again with the clean brush. And like I said, it's more damp. It's not really wet. So I kind of nicknamed this, and I don't even know if this is actually a technique, but I think of it more as a dry water brush because I'm laying down the color onto dry watercolor paper, and then I'm taking a very damp brush to pull that pigment out. So I'm not using a whole lot of water. This gives me more control as to where the color goes. I can definitely deepen the shadows a bit better and have them in the areas that I want rather than on the background where I just want it to be really loose and freestyle. So it's really fun to play with these two different techniques. So I'm just going to finish up the flowers and the leaves and everything here, and I will be back. So the last bit of thing I'm going to do to finish my image is add some dry brushing using Black Soot Distress Ink. This I just go along the edges of the images and it really separates it from the background and adds just makes the image pop off of the page. So it's just a finishing touch that I do sometimes when I'm coloring with Inktense pencils. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Would love feedback. If you like it, give me a thumbs up. If you want to see more videos, please follow me on my YouTube channel and I will see you next time. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.